So thank you so much, distinguished guests, honorable chief guests, your excellencies. We have gathered here today on an occasion where it is very, very logical for us to speak about the highlights. And I promise that I will not take too much time. I'm the first speaker, so I don't want to be held responsible for putting the timelines into a toss. I would try to finish off in 12 minutes, but this is more of a journey, that has happened over the last 50 years. And as we speak about the highlights, we often look away from the basics. So if I could just ask for the next slide, please. So as I said, we talk about a journey for 50 years. And the basic of this is social development. And that's what has been so well done in this country. I am not an expert in economics. There are people who speak better than me, but we've just drawn 7 points, which we believe is the growth of the country and how well it's made the basics. And just take the 7 parts of this data that we have put and do a permutation and combination of any 4. Once you do that, you'll come to basics of the country, which is driving the growth. That is the most important part. Today, over the last 50 years, we have gone ahead from a country where the GDP growth is measured, per capita increase, we can see the income, the inflation, and the export earnings. What you see in the last 2 parts is how the future is going to pan out. 50% of the population below 25 years. Are they going to live the world that we have lived in? I don't think so. What would we look at? We would look at booking tickets on a mobile. I mean, that's what the world is getting at. My son does that, right? So how do we enable logistics to play this role? The last part is what is going to govern our future. The development of infrastructure and digitization. If we look at what we have achieved in the last 2 years, you talk about the resilience of the country. 50 years the country has been independent, and much more before that, and honorable ministers, you have mentioned about it, is how well the country has historically shaped against resilience. Right? I mean, Bangladesh and resilience is something which you could write a book about, and many books have been written about it. But what happens when you show that resilience? At certain point of time, nature doesn't conspire against you, it conspires for you. And I think that's what we are doing in terms of Bangladesh. You can see in terms of pandemic, we are one of the top resilient countries. And you have to see the GDP is not small. When you compare to the other countries, there are a couple of countries which are smaller, but in itself, our GDP is something which allows us to grow. However, in terms of what has been the past can only guide our future. As we graduate from a least developed country to a developed country, we have to eliminate the efficiencies within the logistics ecosystem. We have to embrace digitization and diversify exports. And that is what is going to lead this country to its new growth and new glories. A lot of questions often come in when you talk about a country which is growing in terms of its growth. Is it sustainable? Is it by any chance of luck? Certainly not at least in this case, because like we mentioned, it's so easy for us, and I'll make just one reference to sports because that is what Bengalis are passionate about. An example would probably be when you see Messi take a free kick, right? We see the ball going almost out of the goal post, and suddenly in the last minute it swerves in, and it's a goal. So who's lucky? Is Messi lucky, or is the goalkeeper unlucky? Actually, it's none. because the goalkeeper has just seen brilliance. He was not expecting to see that. And Messi, he's practiced it a million times. So much so that 6% of his goals are actually from free kicks. And that is the resilience. That's the brilliance. You have done it so many years. That is what it is showing. Otherwise, I'm not an economist, and there are better people in this room than me to comment on it. But any 4 of these parameters would show steady growth. It's something which we investors look into. So I think I've taken 3 minutes on the first slide, and I promise that will not be it is not going to make this slide longer than it should be. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So we just discussed about it in the previous presentation. Mahmood Bhai did mention this, and I promise I've not taken it from your presentation, sir. If you would see, it's amongst the top 26 economies of the world that we know. Consumption is going to propel a population of 180 million by 2030. Now, numbers could be wrong here and there, but please do excuse me for that. And consumerism, consumption is going to fuel the economy in future, right? 72% of the consumption is in the nominal GDP. So that's where the big change is happening. In 2020, Bangladesh, we estimate, has handled 1 billion ton of cargo, which needs temperature controlled environment. 80% of it, we estimate, again, is imports, 20% is exports. So what does it mean? For domestic consumption, we will have a young generation looking in to deliver goods yesterday. And for exports, that's a huge potential, and we'll talk about it. Diversification of exports and integrating to the sustainable agenda. I mean, that's what we believe should be the next big step, and that's where we add value in the ecosystem. What we expect is, in terms of exports, we will graduate into the subsectors, which are light manufacturing, and this could be debated, but we believe that these are the 4 products which is going to run it. And what's very important, and when we see the growth, we probably have not taken into account that the competitive industrial performance rank of Bangladesh has increased from 70 to 101 over a period of a decade. And that's not easy, because you're starting at a lower base, and that's where the challenge comes in. So I think one more important thing that we see right at the bottom, but that's a top priority, is how well can Bangladesh leverage its position as a regional hub to provide logistics solution in the Bay of Bengal, in the landlocked countries, and maybe even northeast of India. So this is the opportunity that this country has built up, and it's our responsibilities and duty to ensure that this happens in a way that is equitable. If we go to the next slide, and I promise to run this through because a lot of it we know already, is that investment in logistics will accelerate the sustainable growth. We logisticians are famous, and I have a couple of people from my industry here, so I'm not the only one. We would never been seen okay, we get noticed when we are more than 5% of the balance sheet, right? And we have consistently been doing that for the last 2 years. So that's what it is. But then we have to also see how logistics is accelerating the sustainable growth in the country. First things first is, despite all the great things that we have identified, and it's a reality, that there are logistics inefficiencies in the midst of us. And the faster we eliminate that, the better is it for the country, because your cost would go down. We estimate the logistics sector to be less than, it's about 100 billion market by 2025. When we say this, we have actually taken out the infrastructure, because, you know, a lot of people do mix up the two when you talk about logistics and infrastructure. This is our estimate of pure logistics sector. Very important, and a lot of us will relate to this, is how fast do we have to put in sustainability, and we have to actually eliminate only from the exports to the entire value chain. 2 years, 3 years, I do not know the time. But do we think our partners in the world would be only happy with only the logistics and sustainability part, only in the exports? What about the imports coming in? And I think there's a great thing done here by the local industry, and we'll touch about it. Efficient cold chain facilities to cater to both domestic and international market. I mean, we're talking about 1 million tons of cargo, which needs controlled temperature. You have to see the coastline. You have to see the wonderful catch of shrimps to see how much can it grow. What is this sector? We estimate actually it to be doubled. That's very, very conservatively. That should happen. Could be 3 times as well. Integrating the special economic zones in the multiple gateway port is what we would look at. And that is what is going to drive the next stage of growth for logistics. Digitization. And I know we have a panel, full panel after this and experts to talk about it in terms of what does digitization mean to this industry, where you have tons and tons of paper just to negotiate a document, right? So that's what we have to see. Transparency it brings. What is the cost saving? And like I mentioned, that probably is, I don't want to steal the thunder of the next panel, but I believe these are what it is. As we talk about partnership, as we talk about a Nordic company which has been in this country for 50 years, it's also very important for the country to ask, what is it that an investor in logistics going to bring? Equitable growth is the first thing that we can think of. It's not in our DNA as a Nordic company not to think about partnership that we talk about. Decarbonizing the supply chain in its entirety. I mean, this is something which, if you were to ask me, along with digitization, probably the most important aspect and something which we need to work on. Knowledge transfer to the country. Remove inefficiencies in the logistics sectors. Where is it that we can do that tweaking a little bit here and there? What are those big ticket items that we can do to get efficiencies? Democratize logistics chain through technology, and I'll touch a little bit on that in the next slide. Develop skill management and workforce in investing in human resources. 50% of the workforce is young. They have their own aspirations. They want to grow, and and most important is that their definition of growth and development is widely different to what we had when I started many years ago, right? Extremely important for us is the opportunity to the best Bangladeshi talent to compete in a global environment. I'm not saying this just to please anybody in this room, but 4 years that I've been in this country, I've seen some amazing talent. There's no fear in these kids when they want to question the norms and the balance sheet. So that's where we have a problem when they question the balance sheet, but that's a part of mentoring that we have to do. And most important is providing the competitive edge to exports. In the eventual scenario of near sourcing, right? COVID actually has been the chief transformation officer for all of us, right? At least for me, for logistics, it has happened. And can we actually guarantee 2030 that the entire production would be in South America, Far East, Indian subcontinent? I won't be very comfortable if I were to say that, because when I see the investments being made in European countries, East European countries, North Africa, Adriatic countries, I have my own doubts on that. So these all points do talk about the sustainability and the partnership that we believe we bring in logistics sector. And we are running close to the end of the couple of slides, just a couple more. And if we could just go to the next one. So again, a lot of it would be discussed in the next presentation, but in terms of technology and sustainability agenda, how is it impacted our industry? And actually none of it was 5 years ago. At least I didn't see it. Somebody else saw it. Great. First things first is we believe there is a very, and it's a demand, it's a need about connecting real time all the accurate data which is flowing from the carriers, from the ports, terminals, and customs, and even banking. And that's what we call as the blockchain technology. That is what is going to define logistics in a couple of years, from at best half a decade. Digitization of digitization is key to democratizing logistics and supply chain. Today, I think anybody who wants to book a ticket, example, again, famous example, can book it. Do we have a mean in empowering a small and medium enterprise to have the same right as that entity should have, to have transparency of rate? Financial inclusion, microfinancing is probably a big need for SMEs, right? Access to information. If you ask me, these are the two big ticket items that we have our responsibility to play. Why has sustainability become such a strategic imperative? 155 LED certificate green factories in Bangladesh. This is the highest in the world and speaks so much about the investment and the right investment that the country has made. You link it with a situation where in last 1 year, 3 times more customers are actually asking us as to what we are doing for our ESG guidelines. So the suppliers are enabled, our customers need it, and 2/3 of our customers have their own zero carbon guidelines to follow. 91% of the CEOs today are talking about this. So this is where the sustainability comes in. That is why it is so key. It's a key enabler for business. I think I will not take too much on this, just that the opportunity that Bay of Bengal has to link this part of the world as a regional hub. How can we empower the youth? Opportunities. I mean, Abu Bhai would probably love this, but I don't get the best talent. The best talent in the industry is going into the bank, and I can't compete with the mindset. Of course not. But logistics actually gives a huge opportunity for any young person to grow, to talk about business globally and have a sustainable growth. So that kind of opportunity for the young is something which we would like to do and develop and embrace your strategies the way we have done it for the last 50 years to take the next step for the next 50 years, maybe. The next slide, please. So just a slide in terms of what we emphasize on in terms of sustainability. And the key word here is, and if you have the time, just Google this, the Pacific garbage patch, which, and let me shock you a little bit, is almost the size of France, a patch of garbage in the Pacific Ocean. And that's where not being tuned to sustainability has led us into. We don't want that to happen again. I think I have probably finished my presentation and maybe a couple of minutes here and there. If you go to the last slide, I would thank everybody for giving us a chance. Give us the chance to build Sonar Bangla. Thank you so much. Dhanyabad.
Thank you so much, Angshuman Mustafi, the country manager from Maersk, to deliver the keynote.